Our next question, we'll start with Mr. Crawford, and then we'll go to Ms. Ward, et cetera, and then we'll come back. Okay. A lot of questions tonight about the earnings tax. Recently, the National Association of Insurance Commissioners was granted a 50% rebate on the earnings tax for their employees to keep them from moving their business out of Kansas City. Do you think this is an appropriate method to attract new business and retain existing business? And if so, what do you think this says about the earnings tax and its effect on attracting and retaining business in Kansas City?
I think it said nothing about the earnings tax. I think you could have made an argument. I mean, really, what it came down to, I'm quite sure that the company wouldn't have said it with the earnings tax per se they wanted, but money. They would have taken it in any form. To me, that's an example of how you can hyper-focus on one issue, in this case the earnings tax. Not that the earnings tax isn't important, but there's a set of overarching issues here, and that's, are we prepared to buy companies? To me, much of the issue, and this gets into the cross-border poaching, obviously, that's what triggered that particular action. The problem is that everybody seems to believe this is a governmental problem and a governmental solution. It's not. I've had everybody and their brother tell me, and I'm sure you've all heard it, that what Missouri needs to do is we need to find the same kind of tools that state of Kansas has. What the private sector, and I'm talking about a regional chamber of commerce, needs to do is to make it clear that those businesses, those cities, those developers who engage in poaching will no longer be members of the chamber, will no longer enjoy the chamber benefits. Trust me, the business loss from that will be much more penalizing than any governmental action.
I'd have to say that it says a lot about the earnings tax. I've talked to many businesses, and one of the biggest complaints that I've heard is that they don't appreciate the earnings tax. I have stated that I am technically against it. I think that in order to actually force the city to go in and reform its tax structure and bring things up to date and make things a level playing field for everybody, the voters have to vote and say no in order for the city to be forced to do that. However, it may not pass this time. If I am elected, from day one I will go in there and work towards restructuring the tax form so that in 5 years when it's voted on again, we'll have a plan in place that hopefully everybody will be happy with.
Charlie Angel, here's what I think about it. I think the council should be neutral. You're the voters. It's your money. But let's just do a little math here. They say it's 200,000 or 200 million a year. 5 years, how much is that? 1 billion. 10 years is 2 billion. Okay, the budget is 500 million. Now, in reality, I think that comes out to 4% a year. Oh, and it's going to be phased out over 10 years. Okay. Now, the thing about it is, this current city council has spilt more than that. Wasted a lot more than 4% a year. We'll have new jobs coming in. We'll grow this city, create new jobs, new population. It's a good thing to get rid of.
Well, I'm not running against Charlie, so I hate to correct him, but as John Adams said, you're entitled to your own opinion, but not your own facts. Our general fund is about $500 million. The earnings tax is the great bulk of that. We're going to lose $20 million a year for 10 years, $200 million or 40%. And that's going to have a devastating impact on public safety and basic services in all of Kansas City. To answer your question about the insurance commissioners, we were faced with a tough choice. The state of Kansas has wonderful incentive programs to steal our businesses. They also have a Sprint complex that's half empty, so they can give them very cheap rent. In order to save half the earnings tax, we did make an agreement to rebate half the e-tax over, I believe, a 10-year period, but they also agreed to bring a number of meetings and conventions in town. Not a great deal, but best one we could get. It's hard for the city to compete with the state.
had clarified numbers on both of those issues, and it's correct. We're talking 20 million a year, so numbers need to be correct when you're talking about them. I know of AMC is being courted right now to move their headquarters. They're getting quartered about $46 million upfront money. Johnson County should soon, they've got to be running out of money. This competition between an entire state and a city just is impossible. We can't match that. We can't even attempt to match that, and we have no tools at the state to do that. I, like Mr. Crawford, questioned whether we even should be creating those tools. Logically, you want those jobs to stay here. The sucking sound is very loud, but somewhere along the way, this region has got to demand that we do not cannibalize each other. So creating and battling with the dollars back and forth will only get worse. I do understand from what I'm hearing on the Kansas side is that there are some rumblings from the other counties in Kansas, so Kansas may end up taking care of itself.
This question will start with Ms. Ward and go to Mr. Angel and come back and then work through. Again, this is a question on a lot of people's mind because of current events in Wisconsin. What is your position on collective bargaining for city employees? Ms. Ward.
I don't think that public sector jobs should be using bargaining tools as a way to deliver services. I don't necessarily agree with the public sector having unions. I think it should be more of a private sector thing. That's my simplest answer.
I think we should have a fair playing field for all people that work there. I mean, I was raised in a family that my mother treated us all fair. You might not like the decision, and incidentally, I'm not a career politician, so I'm not bought by anybody or have any special interest here. I'm just me, a good word, handshake, and a shoestring budget. So when you're talking about fairness, we want to stay fair with everybody and have the Kansas City to have a fair playing field.
This is kind of a touchy issue for me today. I support collective bargaining for public employees. Today I lost the endorsement of the AFL-CIO. Previously, the firefighters union endorsed my opponent, and it's because I stood up for you and public safety by opposing the mass integration to the fire department and opposed the $30 million pension giveaway to the former mass employees. I think you need to, now my opponent supports giving the $30 million to the mass employees. There was another issue we had dealing with a group called ABC, a non-union, trying to establish a trade school. To me, it was a zoning issue, it wasn't a union issue. But again, I got crossways with the carpenters union and they gave my opponent $6,000. So bottom line, I'll do what's right.
Collective bargaining is working in Kansas City, and the backs of our city employees, which are mostly under union, collective bargaining unions, they opened those up in order for us to balance the budget the last 3 years with the revenue down. It's about where you draw the line, the relationships you have. We've had good management, labor relations. We've built that over time, and we need to continue doing that. Once you let one side completely control one or the other, then it does get lopsided. When revenues were tough, we've cut over $200 million in the last 3 years. They were willing to go to the mat and do what was needed to do to make the city's budget balance, and we've done that on their backs. They've not had a raise for 3 years, and they're not looking at one next year either. So it's about relationships and how you handle those negotiations, and not just bending over backwards. So it's a balancing game. Some cities do it well, some cities don't, and we've done it well.
I think the question of collective bargaining is, you almost can't answer the question without asking a couple of other questions. will there be binding arbitration? Is there a right to strike? So that the answer about do you believe in whether it makes sense to have collective bargaining, I wouldn't agree with collective bargaining if there was a right to strike on the part of the police or fire department, for example, if there's a life safety issue. I think that makes no sense. I think from the standpoint of the employees, if there was collective bargaining, but no right of arbitration in the event of an impasse, and you couldn't strike, there's no value to the employees. It seems to me that you have to have a no right to strike and the right to binding arbitration in the event there is an impasse. The idea that you actually negotiate what's equitable should not be off-putting to anyone, because that's really all collective bargaining is, and its core. The real issue is what else goes with it, the right to strike or binding arbitration.